Okay, so our next presentation is from Erin Wolfe of University of Kansas Libraries on automation and integration, creating digital objects in ArchivesSpace and Islandora. The University of Kansas Libraries uses ArchivesSpace as its archival collection management system and Islandora as its digital repository. In this presentation, Erin Wolfe will discuss University of Kansas's approach to automation and the creation of digital objects in these two systems and the integration between the two. Erin will also highlight how they create and manage digital objects in bulk, saving processing time and increasing the relationship between these two content management systems, ultimately resulting in improved findability and usability for the library staff and users. Erin's been the metadata librarian for the University of Kansas Library since 2017 and has worked with digital material in library and archive settings since 2011 with an eye toward improving the usability of technical tasks whenever possible. His research interests include computational analysis of textual material, application of linked data resources, and other practical integrations of technology and metadata. Erin, if you'd like to start us off.
Yes. Thanks. So yes, I am the metadata librarian at the University of Kansas. Like most places at the University of Kansas Libraries, we use a few different platforms for delivering and managing digital content. In particular, we use ArchivesSpace for archival collection management and Islandora as our digital repository and home and access point for digital collections. My role in managing these is to create the metadata records, add the metadata and the digitized content to Islandora, and create digital objects in ArchivesSpace. Islandora is actually a relatively new platform for us. After a several-year-long preparation and rollout process, we began adding content to the production version in 2018, and we've been migrating content from various legacy platforms and storage locations since that time. One of the rules that we had for moving content into Islandora is that there needed to be a record of it somewhere else. Usually this is ArchivesSpace and a finding aid, or maybe the library catalog. We've done this primarily for good record keeping, to avoid orphan content, and to help with knowing what we have and where it is. So if you're looking at a collection in ArchivesSpace that's been digitized, we want it to be clear what's digitized and to be able to find it easily. And on the other side, if you're looking at digital images in a digital collection, we want to be able to easily identify the related resource records for that item or collection. So we've had a conscious effort to make sure the digital content is findable, linked, and related whenever possible. So it's with this in mind that I wanted to approach this topic today, which is the creation of digital objects in both ArchivesSpace and in Islandora, and the interrelation between them, specifically as we engage in them here at KU. We're using Islandora 7 at this time, but I hope that the principles of this method might be applicable to a variety of processes and software. Also, I wanted to note that I had intended to make my scripts available in a public repository, but I haven't been able to do that yet. I'm happy to share them as Jupyter notebooks if you're interested, so just feel free to email me, or if you have questions about any of them. I want to take a brief minute to establish the meanings that I'm using today when I say digital objects, which may or may not differ from your usages of them, so that we're all starting from the same point. Digital archive or digital object in ArchivesSpace is basically a record noting the existence of a digital file or resource. It describes the file, records the metadata, has information about where the file lives outside of ArchivesSpace, and where it fits into an archival collection or resource. A digital object in Islandora, on the other hand, is the item itself. It consists of the master file, the full metadata record, the preservation metadata, and all of the derivative files like access formats, thumbnails, other versions of the metadata, and maybe related digital material. So the method I'm going to talk about today is one that I use when we have first a collection of digitized files, and second, a finding aid with relevant details. So this might be the case with a newly digitized collection, or as has been the target of a recent project here at KU, with collections that have been digitized in the past that have a related finding aid. Basically, we begin with the existing files and connect them to the finding aid, extract the relevant metadata, use that to create mods records, which is the metadata schema that we use for digitized content in KU libraries. Then we use these mods records as the basis for creating a digital collection of the files in Islandora. And then as the last step, create the links between the two systems so that the finding aid and the digital collection can talk to each other. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this presentation is to walk through an example collection and describe this process in a little more detail. So here's a directory of TIFF files that I found on a network storage drive recently. Using the directory name and the file names, I was able to confirm the collection that these were part of. And we have a finding aid for it. So here's the finding aid for the T.Y. Baird papers. Baird was, among other things, an agent and manager for a couple baseball teams in the Kansas City area from the 1920s to 50s. If we look a little closer, we can see there's several paper series and a photo series. The images that I found are the entirety of the photo series. It's a pretty small collection. There's 95 photographs. It's been digitized in full, but was never put online. The finding aid is complete down to the folder level, and most of the folders have just a single photograph, but there are some folders that do have multiple photos. So if you can see that first entry under photographs, it even says 2 images. This is a folder level entry in the finding aid's public interface. Babe Didrikson playing pool. Babe Didrikson was an American athlete who was noted to be one of the greatest athletes of all time, including being named Woman Athlete of the 20th Century by the Associated Press in 1999. Here's the same entry in the internal view as an archival object. I want to point out this long RefID number, starts with 6040FC. This is an identifier for this archival object. So in ArchivesSpace, each level of content or container, as well as certain packages of information, gets a unique identifier like this to allow for identification and interrelation between the data. So in all, we have a full detailed finding aid and a folder of TIFF files. And what I want to do is to capture the information from the finding aid, link that to the actual scans that we have, use that to build metadata records, create a digital collection in Islandora, and create links between the finding aid and this new collection. For demonstration today, I've chosen a nice uncomplicated collection, but this process definitely works with more complicated collections as well. Like with any sort of archival or digital processing, you start with a workflow and adjust as needed, depending on the materials that you have. So I'm going to start with exporting the finding aid as an XML file. And here's just a snippet showing 3 individual items. If you can see this, you can see the metadata is pretty minimal, just the title along with box and folder numbers. Most items in this collection just had a title. Some also have dates and descriptions. But I also want to point out this number at the top level of this first item. That's that 6040FC number that identifies the Babe Didrikson playing pool archival object. If you can see, you may notice other RefIDs as well, identifying the box, folder, or parent, but this one is the only one that we're interested in. The next step is to parse out this information from the finding aid into something more usable for creating metadata records. So I use the Python library Beautiful Soup to extract the metadata from each item and use pandas to store it in a structured data format called a data frame. So here you can see some of the entries. We have a box number, folder number, title, and when present, a date or description. Also, you may notice on the left that we're tracking that RefID number 6040FC, so we can bring that along with the rest of the metadata. So now that we have the metadata in a structured format, I can build the mods records. I've written a set of Python scripts that essentially builds individual mods records from a sort of template, calling the metadata from the finding aid along with some standardized entries and writing out individual XML files. But if we start with the finding aid, we'll end up with a single record for each folder. This is fine in some cases, but in this case, you may recall that we had some folders with multiple images. Since this collection is going to be displayed at the item level, we need an individual metadata record for each image and not for each folder. So instead, we're going to start with the file names, but keep this table in mind because we're going to come back to it in a few minutes. Here's a few of the file names. The format it follows has the institution abbreviation, which is Kenneth Spencer Research Library, the collection number, followed by the folder number, and the item number at the end if there is one. Again, most of these folders have only a single item. So in this case, they wouldn't have an item number. And because this is a smaller collection, we don't have to worry about box numbers because all the folders are just in one box. Since the finding aid is at the folder level, that's the primary concern at this point. So I want to target the folder number in each file name and bring that over to a new data frame. So you can see here on the right that we have the file name and the folder number as separate columns. And that's what's going to let us link each individual image to the right information from the finding aid. So you can see at the top there that there's 2 entries for folder 1, for instance. By starting with the list of files and matching on the folder number, we can bring in the associated metadata from the finding aid's data frame, giving us something that looks like this. So here we have the merge data frame, which has the file name, the folder number, the ArchivesSpace RefID, the box number, the title, and any other metadata, which in these specific entries is just null values. But starting with this set of details, I can now build metadata records for each individual image. So I pass this information through the Python scripts that I mentioned to get and validate mods XML files. Here's a snippet of a mods record built from this technique. You can see the title, the collection's call number, a subject pulled from the collection level record that's been linked to the fast linked data vocabulary, and some other details. And here is the ArchivesSpace RefID as a related item, saying that our item is referenced by this ArchivesSpace identifier. So having this number embedded here will make it easier to map back to the original archival object when it's time. So now that we've got the mods record, we're ready to build the digital collection in Islandora. Here's the empty collection, which I created manually. This blue box at the bottom shows there's 0 items. With this in place, I can run a separate script that starts with the mods records and creates individual items in Islandora, using Islandora's REST API to create an item, add the related TIFF file or other primary file, add the mods record, and Islandora generates any required derivative files. After it runs, we can see the completed collection. The small blue box at the bottom shows all 95 images have been ingested. Here's an item view in Islandora. This view is cropped, but there's additional metadata below, as well as links to download the content, metadata, or other files. So now that we've got the digital collection built, and there's references back to the finding aid at the collection level and in each item's metadata. So now it's time to build the digital objects in ArchivesSpace and connect it to these items in Islandora. For this step, we'll use the APIs of both Islandora and ArchivesSpace. So I'll start with a query of the Islandora API. This could also be done from another process, but I prefer the query because it's the most direct. The query returns specific metadata for each of the items that I've just added. At KU, we've decided to keep the metadata for the ArchivesSpace digital objects pretty simple, since the full metadata record is stored elsewhere. For this collection, we'll just return the title, that ArchivesSpace RefID, and the URI for the item's location in Islandora. Metadata is transformed along with some other collection level values into the JSON model used to create the digital object in ArchivesSpace. In this model, we'll include 2 key file versions, the Islandora URI, which is a link to the item itself, and a thumbnail URI derived from the item's URI, which allows us to display the item's thumbnail in the public interface. We'll use the ArchivesSpace API to create the digital object from this JSON model and to publish it. And then as the last step, we'll use that RefID that has been following us around since the beginning, that 6040FC number, to link the newly created digital object as a new instance of the original archival object in the finding aid. So looking at the results, here's the original item view from the public interface. Here's the new item view with the digital object attached and the thumbnail embedded. So if you click the thumbnail, it'll take the user to the item in Islandora. Or if you click the link on the left side, it'll take you to the digital object record in ArchivesSpace. And that's pretty much it. Here's another quick slide to show how an item looks with multiple digital objects. You see there's 2 thumbnails, 2 digital object links on the left side that point to the individual entries for those items. And that is it. So again, here's my email. If you'd like to get in touch, I'd be happy to hear from you to talk about any of this, answer questions, or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And thank you for having your email on the slide. We did get a question during your presentation asking if you would drop your email into the chat. So at the end of your presentation, whenever you get a chance, if you could do that. We do have a question for you though. I saw some additional metadata in Islandora like subject fields. Are those coming from a template or pulled from elsewhere in the ArchivesSpace hierarchy of description?
For when I'm doing a collection like this, those usually come from the finding aid. The script, I do it in a Jupyter notebook, but the script that that extracts the metadata for each item pulls the subjects from the finding aid, and then it calls out to the fast linked vocabulary to see if it can find a matching for it, and I can review them at that stage. And so if I want to include, if it's a type of subject term that's applicable to the whole collection, then I'll leave it in there. If it's more specialized and maybe only applicable to maybe a sub-series or something like that, then I may leave it out altogether or tweak it as necessary.
Thanks. All right. Are you planning on using the set RefID function in ArchivesSpace? If so, how would that change your workflow?
I'm not planning to do that at this time, and I'm not sure how that would change. I think I'm not necessarily involved with establishing the original the archival objects or anything. That's the manuscripts processing archivists, but so I'm not sure that'd be a question I'd have to look into.
I know we have some other people from University of Kansas attending today, so if they want to type in the answer to the question in the Q&A, they're more than welcome to do that. Which version of Islandora are you using?
We're using Islandora 7. There's the RIT people are starting to look towards Islandora 8, hopefully within the year, but right now we're using 7.
Okay, thanks. All right, that's all the questions in the chat, so we're all caught up. I'm gonna pause for just a second to see if we get any additional questions in the chat before we move along to our next presentation. But thank you, Erin, that was really great. Oh, we did get a question. Have these workflows been implemented from other starting points like digital objects that existed first in Islandora, get a resource record for the collection much later?
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple different ways to approach this. So I kind of, for the purposes of the presentation, I went with is kind of the most straightforward approach, which is starting from A, B, C. But yes, I've done this in different orders and with different sets of material, and used existing collections to sort of retrofit these, I guess.
Awesome, thanks.